Here's our last part. Sometimes your organizational patterns are used to structure body paragraphs for an essay. One of the things that we see whenever we look at papers that students have written, the students that are scoring in the upper parts, 3s and 4s, they're using an organizational structure to compose their body paragraphs. So I want to show you several examples of how students are choosing to do this work. So here's the thesis or the prompt that they were working toward. To make a difference, people must work together to broaden education throughout the world. That was this student's thesis. So now I'm going to take you into the body portion of this student's essay and walk you through what they are doing. I'm going to read it, and then we're going to come back to this screen and talk about which one of these organizational patterns do you see this student using in the body of their paper. So this one right here is essay number 17 from the released papers in the scoring guide from 2017. I've already read you the thesis. And so we've got a paragraph here, a paragraph here, and a paragraph here in the body of the paper. So she says, to uphold a successful learning community is a large task one person cannot bear alone. There is a need for teachers, nurses, administrators, and funding. In order to take education worldwide, lawyers and government corporations would also be necessary. None of these factors would be easy to obtain, but the effects would be tremendous. Now let's look at these next two paragraphs. When one looks to the U.S., one can hear the U.S. ringing, the bells ringing, and children screaming for many blocks around a public elementary, middle, or high school. Because education is widespread and mandatory, the U.S. has been a superpower in the world economy. Education in the U.S. was not always widespread. So we've got even a comparison in here, a comparison and contrast within this paragraph. When people stood together and asked the government for reform, it happened. It took cities, states, and organizations filled with individuals asking for change to occur. So we see this entire piece right here is about the United States. And if you look too, he's got some parallel structure. When one looks to the United States, and now look here, or she, I don't know if it's a male or female, when one looks to India's education. Now, listen to what is happening here. You're going to see it immediately. When one looks to India's education, the picture is not quite as pretty. Schooling rarely occurs. Many experts agree that the widespread abuse of women is even due to lack of education. However, many organizations with many volunteers have worked to educate young children so women do not have to face this problem. These same experts say by educating women, they are given the ability to survive on their own. Men know the importance of women in society. And then look at this transition into the conclusion right here. When looking at the contrast between the U.S. and India, dramatic differences are seen. It's completely obvious, I'm sure to you by now, that this student was working with a comparison and contrast structure. And I want you to look again here. Look at this score point. And what we see is that in almost every instance, whenever we have students that have worked toward a really high score point, we can see that they've thoughtfully crafted their organizational structure within their body in a way that totally fits their thesis. For example, to make a difference, people must work together to broaden education throughout the world. So in that first part, he talked about the United States. And then in the second part, he talked about how we had to do that same work in India to advance the educational elements. Here's another one. This student also scored a 4. Here's the thesis. Working together to make a difference in the world may seem like a difficult task, but it can bring rewarding results. Let's look at essay 15 and decide, what did this writer do to organize the body paragraphs to structure the rewarding results? Now, I want you to look through here. You see that this whole body really only has one paragraph. And so he or she could have made it a little bit easier for the reader to divide this into the section. But it's still effective the way it is, because as we looked in our previous lessons, it's also appropriate to use an organizational structure or approach within a paragraph. So let's look at it and see what we think this writer did to organize the ideas in this paragraph. For a school-wide recycling program to work, it's necessary for someone to take initiative and encourage a large amount of participation. For example, this can be done by passing out flyers, promoting recycling programs throughout the school, and having administrators, such as principals and even vice principals, endorse the recycling program, enhancing its efficiency. As mentioned before, to be able to make a difference, a good cause needs many participants. This can be achieved by speaking to the students about the recycling program and encouraging everyone to help. And then we have examples. Some examples include reusing plastic grocery bags, reusing containers such as cardboard boxes, placing water bottles in a recycling bin so it can be taken to a recycling center, and recycling paper. And then it goes further. As a part of the recycling initiative, a school will be also able to organize events such as park cleanups, where volunteers, students, teachers, and administrators all go to a designated place with litter, such as a park, and assist in cleanup to make it a safer, cleaner area. In time, the efforts of the community will pay off, which may encourage other people and groups to do the same. And so then he restates, by working together, a group of people are able to achieve great things. And whenever you look at what this writer was doing, you can look at it in a couple of ways. He established a problem with like the recycling area and then offered several solutions. But you could also look at that entire paragraph as a set of describing specific elements of what that would look like and sound like for each one of those elements that were given in the paragraph, kind of like this part right here, the such as, the examples here of what they would do and where they would go, how they would work. And so we can see that it's really an effective strategy, again, this student was able to employ to reach that score of a 4-point. Here's the next one. This student's thesis is, sometimes the only thing to make a difference is cooperation. Let's read and see how the student used an organizational strategy to structure the body of the paragraph. And again, I know it's hard to read, so let's dig into it together. I want you to notice also that this one right here is in one complete, it's not divided, it's just one paragraph. This will be another one of those examples to where it's not, a series of paragraphs, but it's what's happening inside the paragraph that really gives us a good heft and explanation that advances that thesis about cooperation. So he begins, or she begins, Africa is by far the poorest nation on earth. Its state is discussed all over the world. One organization has set out to truly help its state of poverty. Comic Relief sponsors a day called Red Nose Day. On Red Nose Day, celebrities and other people do spontaneous things for money, like shaving their heads, hosting a city-scale bake sale, and submitting themselves to public humiliation, all in order to raise money to fund improvement in healthcare in Africa. Okay? Now, so you've got this description right here, and then look at this key word here, however. However, the key to Comic Relief success is their teamwork. Red Nose Day would not be as efficient or effective with only one person putting forth effort. The organization is supported all throughout Europe with help and involvement from leaders of Great Britain, Germany, Ireland, France, and Spain, and other countries as well. All these leaders and plenty of other influential people, along with the citizens of Europe, work together in order to raise money to improve the living conditions of Africa. With so much support, Comic Relief's Red Nose Day raised 20 million pounds, making a huge difference in Africa just this year. So, in this one right here, you could see that this is a problem and solution, because he establishes that is the problem, and then they're offering a solution with that, with all of their efforts. But I think too that it's almost a comparison and a contrast right here. And let me explain what I mean by that. He shows that, and he describes in that first body part about what the organization does. But then he brings out that important distinction, contrasting. It's not just that they're doing it, it's that there are so many people working together to get that done. I think that this is one that you could really say that he's been pretty sophisticated in. And the other thing that he's done in there is he's added description, and he establishes the thesis there with the problem that they need to make a difference, and then offers the solution with the Red Nose Day. But then that is really, he's also just contrasting and really pointing out that distinction that makes a big difference is that cooperation is what caused that to have such an impact. Once again, I want to remind you that these students, because they have really tightly controlled the focus of their essay to prove that thesis, that tight control is because they've really thoughtfully considered how they're going to put their ideas and how they're going to make them connect to each other. And those organizational patterns that we've looked at are the very thing that provide that coherence between the ideas that really leads to a good score. Here is the last writer we are going to look at today. This is a thesis, and it's unusual because her thesis really doesn't appear until the end of the essay. Usually we see, and usually it's a good idea for assessment practices, is to let the grader know right ahead what you're talking about and where you're headed. But this writer, her thesis or his thesis is at the end. One person has a small chance of making a difference. People working together can make the difference. So let's look at what this writer has done. You're going to see all of it right here in 2 paragraphs. Every Tuesday morning on my way to school, I see practically every house with a blue recycling bin along a regular green trash can. The recycling bins are so full that the lid won't even close does not even close all the way. A dedicated neighbor had sent a flyer to the entire neighborhood to promote recycling. He would weigh each and every recycling bin, and the house with the heaviest bin will receive a gift card. Even though saving the environment might not be the sole reason why some neighbors are recycling, this recycling competition going on has increased our neighbors' recycling output exponentially. Seeing how effective a little competition could be, I tried a similar method with my friends. What we see here, and I'm just going to pause to really look at what's happening in this paragraph, is that this paragraph right here is what we would call in that white cube, it's an anecdote. And she's explaining and lining out all the things that were happening in her own experience. And she's going to use that and explain it in the next sections about how that relates to the thesis that she's going to narrow down to toward the end of the paper. You noticed here that she's really just describing this competition and how it really isn't, is why it's gotten so good, why it's so overflowing. Then we have her response to what's happening. I challenged a large group of friends to recycle. Each person would have their own box, and the person with the heaviest box would also get a gift card. After a month or two, friends invited their friends to the competition. So you can see the building, more and more people advancing her thesis. And we had nearly our entire school recycling. Everyone donated a small amount of money to ante up the prize. Rather than weigh one box per person, everyone had at least 3 full boxes, quite a jump compared to the initial amount when I started the competition. Now, we've got 2 examples right here. We've got the person in her neighborhood, so one person, then a large neighborhood, and then that one person and the things she saw in her neighborhood inspired her. Then we have the one person, then her friends, then the school, and you've got a lot of people recycling at the end. Now, what's really important about offering an anecdote is you have to explain why that anecdote connects to the thesis. And here's where she has her thesis. It's actually at the end, I think, right here. One person has a small chance of making a huge difference. It's not impossible, but highly unlikely. Not everyone can be recognized by the press and gain publicity for their contributions and efforts. A group of people, just like her neighborhood and her school friends, can do so much more. They can get more done and make a difference. Recycling in this case started, and so here's her explanation. It started as one person, the one person in her neighborhood, her as the one person in her school, recycling a couple of pounds, then practically a whole community was the neighborhood, then the whole school, the whole community, to recycling a couple of tons. People working together can make a difference. So you've got this part of the thesis and this part right here. So she's got kind of a contrast here in this paragraph. So it's really sophisticated. And you can see what happens right here is that she is giving you and I didn't put it in here. I probably need to add it. I'll just do one of those real quick for us. Oh, I should have done a text box. Let's do that. Anecdote and an explanation. And the thing that makes, I think, these so powerful is it's not that they had an organizational strategy. It's that organizational strategy, like this one we're looking at right here, giving that anecdote and showing how it built from the neighborhood to being inspired to her school that involved the whole community. That structure of the anecdote was the thing that was the effective way to lead the reader to understand how that grew from one person to more. It's that the organizational structure was the key thing that helped them put their ideas together in a way that would help the reader figure out what the thesis was. It was the proof, and the selection of the organizational strategy. Again, you know, whenever we think about these right here, it's not that you can find the organizational strategy or that you can identify the organizational strategy. It's that you can look at like the anecdote and explanation. You choose the one that best represents the way you want your reader to understand the topic. It's almost like a path with these little cubes. Whenever you stack them up together, you connect them together, and that's the path the reader follows that enables them to understand your ideas. And ultimately, it's the thing that will get you the score point that's going to help you reach your goals.